The laughter was the worst part. Not the cold stone beneath her knees, nor the weight of 1,000 stairs pressing down on her shoulders like iron chains, nor even the humiliation of kneeling before the entire gathered assembly of the Northern Territories with her dress torn and her hair hanging loose like a common servant's. No. It was the laughter that carved itself into her bones, that echoed in the cathedral-high ceilings of the throne room until it became a living, breathing thing that fed on her shame. They laughed because they could not believe it. The Alpha King, Chiron Ashenfell, ruler of the 7 United Pacts, conqueror of the Blood Wars, the male whose very name silenced rooms and bent spines, had just announced before every Alpha, Luna, and Elder within 100 miles that she, Alara Thorne, the rejected girl with no pack and no name, was his chosen mate. And they laughed. The sound clawed at her, vicious and gleeful, bouncing off marble columns and gilded archways. She kept her gaze fixed on the floor, on the intricate mosaic tiles depicting wolves running beneath a silver moon. Because if she looked up, if she met their eyes, she would shatter into 1,000 pieces that could never be reassembled. Silence! The word cut through the chaos like a blade through silk. Kieran's voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of absolute authority, and the laughter died in throats as if strangled. The sudden quiet was worse somehow, thick and suffocating, filled with the collective judgment of the powerful. Alara dared to lift her gaze, just a fraction, just enough to see the polished black boots standing 3 paces before her. She did not, could not look higher. To meet his eyes now, after everything, would be unbearable. Rise. His command was soft, almost gentle, and that gentleness was somehow more terrifying than fury would have been. She tried. Her legs trembled so violently that she nearly collapsed again, her body betraying her in front of everyone who mattered. A ripple of whispered amusement moved through the crowd like wind through wheat. How pathetic, they murmured. How absurd. The Alpha King and a wolfless reject. And then his hand was there, extended toward her, palm up in an offering that made the whispers turn sharp and shocked. An Alpha King did not offer his hand. He took. He commanded. He ruled. But here he stood, waiting for her to choose, and the choice itself felt like a trap she could not see but knew existed. Alara's breath caught. She could smell him from where she knelt. Pine and winter frost and something darker. Something that reminded her of thunderstorms and ancient forests where no light reached. The scent wrapped around her like a physical presence, and her body responded in ways that horrified her, her pulse quickening despite every rational thought screaming at her to run. She placed her trembling hand in his fingers closed around hers, and the contact sent a shock of heat racing up her arm, a sensation so intense it bordered on pain. He pulled her to her feet with effortless strength, and suddenly she was standing far too close to him. Close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. Close enough to see the intricate embroidery on his black ceremonial coat. Close enough to understand exactly how much larger he was than her, how easily he could break her if he chose. But when she finally forced herself to meet his gaze, she found something she had not expected. Recognition. His eyes were the color of molten gold, inhuman and beautiful, and utterly focused on her as if she were the only person in the crowded throne room. As if the hundreds of witnesses did not exist. As if the world had narrowed to just this moment, just this breath, just the space between them that crackled with something she could not name but felt in every nerve. "You are mine," he said. And though his voice remained quiet, it carried to every corner of the vast hall. "Let any who question this come forward now." No one moved. No one dared. But Alara could feel their judgment like a weight pressing on her lungs, could hear their thoughts as clearly as if they shouted them aloud. She's nothing, wolfless, rejected by her own mate. What game is he playing? Kieran's hand moved to her face, his thumb brushing along her jaw in a gesture so intimate that gasps rose from the assembly. His touch was surprisingly gentle, but she could feel the leashed power in it, the carefully controlled strength of a predator who had learned not to crush what he held. 3 months ago, he began, his gaze never leaving hers, I sent word throughout my territories that I sought my true mate. I said I would know her when I found her, and that no title, no bloodline, no pack name would matter, only the bond. Alara's heart hammered against her ribs. She remembered those proclamations, remembered hearing them in the village where she'd hidden after her rejection, remembered thinking how foolish any female would be to hope. You laughed then too, Chiron continued, finally turning his attention to the crowd, and his voice dropped into something cold and dangerous. You laughed and said I would choose among your daughters, your sisters, your carefully groomed offerings of political convenience. He paused, and the temperature in the room seemed to plummet. You were wrong. His hand moved from Alara's jaw to the back of her neck, his fingers tangling in her hair in a possessive gesture that made her breath catch and her knees threaten to buckle again. The touch sent electricity singing down her spine, awakening sensations she had thought died the day Marcus rejected her in front of his entire pack. In 3 days' time, Chiron said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute decree, I will unveil my bride before the Council of Alphas. Until then, let any who disrespects what is mine answer to me directly. The threat hung in the air like drawn steel, and as Chiron turned, his hand still possessive on her neck, guiding her toward the massive doors that would lead them from this room of judgment, Alara felt the full weight of what had just happened crash over her. The Alpha King had claimed her, publicly, irrevocably. But why? 3 months earlier. The morning Marcus rejected her, it rained. Alara stood in the center of the pack gathering ground, mud seeping through the worn soles of her boots, her hair plastered to her face by the relentless downpour. Around her, the Thornwood pack had assembled in a loose circle, their expressions ranging from pity to disgust to cold satisfaction. She could smell their collective judgment, mixing with the scent of wet earth and pine. Marcus stood before her on the raised platform where pack justice was dispensed, looking every inch the alpha heir he was born to be. Tall, golden-haired, perfectly formed. Once, she had thought him beautiful. Once, 3 years ago, when the mate bond had snapped in the place between them, she had believed the universe had given her a gift. She'd been 17 and stupid with hope.
Alara Thorn,
Marcus said, his voice carrying easily over the sound of rain. He did not look at her. He hadn't truly looked at her in months. I, Marcus Vale, future alpha of the Thornwood pack, hereby reject you as my mate. I sever the bond between us. You are released. The words were formal, ancient, required by pack law, but the pain that followed them was anything but ceremonial. It started in her chest, a tearing sensation as if someone had reached inside her ribcage and was slowly pulling her heart out through her sternum. Alara gasped, her knees buckling, and she caught herself with her hands in the mud. The bond, that invisible thread that had connected her to Marcus for 3 years, snapped with an almost audible crack that she felt in her very soul. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The world tilted sideways, gray at the edges, and she heard someone whimpering before she realized the sound came from her own throat. Do you accept this rejection? The pack elder's voice was flat, disinterested. He'd seen this before. Rejections happened, especially when one mate was found wanting. Alara forced her head up, forced her eyes to focus through the rain and tears. Marcus still wasn't looking at her. Behind him stood Leanna Blackwater, daughter of the wealthiest pack in the territory, her hand resting possessively on Marcus's arm. Beautiful Liana, with her perfect bloodline and her wolf that could tear through enemies like paper. Do you accept? The elder repeated, impatient now. Alara's voice broke. She tried again. I accept. The finality of those words crashed over her like a physical blow. Around the circle, she heard the murmurs begin. Finally, about time he rid himself of that burden. Wolfless and weak. What was the moon goddess thinking? She wanted to scream at them that she hadn't asked for this, hadn't chosen to be born without the ability to shift, hadn't chosen Marcus as her mate any more than he'd chosen her. But her voice was gone, drowned in pain and rain and shame. Marcus finally looked at her then, and the coldness in his eyes was worse than the rejection itself. You have until sunset to leave Thornwood territory. Take only what you can carry. Your presence here is no longer welcome. Exile. He was exiling her. Alara somehow found her feet, though her legs shook so violently she could barely stand. She did not look back as she walked through the circle of watching wolves, their eyes boring into her back like claws. She did not look back when she heard Leanna's musical laugh or Marcus's low response. She did not look back when she reached the edge of the gathering ground and the forest swallowed her whole. She walked for hours, deeper into territory she did not know, until her legs gave out entirely and she collapsed beneath an ancient oak tree. The rain had stopped, but she was soaked through, shivering, her body still racked with the phantom pain of a severed bond. This is how I die, she thought distantly. Alone in the woods, rejected, wolfless, nothing. But she didn't die. As twilight fell and the forest grew dark around her, Alara heard something moving through the undergrowth, something large. Her heart hammered with sudden terror, her survival instinct finally kicking through the numbness. She tried to move, to run, but her body wouldn't respond. The creature emerged from the shadows, and Alara's breath stopped entirely. It was a wolf, but not like any wolf she'd ever seen. Massive, easily twice the size of a normal shifter in wolf form, with fur so black it seemed to absorb the failing light. Its eyes, God, its eyes, glowed like molten gold in the darkness, fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel stripped bare. The wolf took one step toward her, then another, its movements liquid and predatory. Alara pressed herself back against the tree trunk, knowing she should run, knowing she was about to die, but unable to move as those golden eyes held her captive. When the wolf was close enough that she could feel its breath on her face, smell the wild scent of it, pine and frost and power, it did something she never expected. It lowered its massive head and pressed its nose gently against her neck, right where Marcus's mark should have been. And then, impossibly, it began to shift. The shift was like watching reality unmake itself and reform into something new. Bone and muscle rippled beneath midnight fur, the wolf's form elongating, reshaping, until a man knelt before her in the gathering darkness. A man so striking that Alara forgot, for one suspended moment, how to breathe. He was tall, she could tell even with him kneeling, with black hair that fell past his shoulders, and a face carved from shadow and sharp angles. But it was his eyes that held her frozen. They remained gold, inhuman and luminous, fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel like prey caught in a predator's sights. He was also completely naked. Alara's face flushed hot despite the cold, and she jerked her gaze away, staring determinedly at the tree roots near her feet. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. "You're hurt." His voice was deep, rough, as if he hadn't spoken in a long time. Not a question, a statement. "I'm fine," Alara whispered, the lie obvious even to her own ears. She was shaking uncontrollably, her body still racked with phantom pain from the severed bond, her clothes soaked through, her mind fractured. A low sound rumbled from his chest, not quite a growl, but close. "You're not fine. You're dying." The blunt words should have frightened her. Instead, they felt like relief. Like someone finally speaking the truth of what she felt. "I was rejected," she heard herself say, the words hollow. "The bond was severed. I'll heal, eventually." The pack healers had told her it would take weeks, maybe months, for the pain to fade. Some never fully recovered. No. He moved closer and she could feel the heat radiating from his skin, could smell that intoxicating scent of pine and winter that made something deep in her chest twist with confused longing. "You won't heal from this, not without help." Alara finally forced herself to look at him again, keeping her eyes firmly on his face. "What do you mean?" His jaw tightened, a muscle twitching there. A rejected mate bond doesn't just hurt, It tears holes in your soul. Without a wolf to help you heal, those holes will keep tearing until there's nothing left. He paused, his golden eyes searching her face. You're wolfless. It wasn't a question, but she nodded anyway, shame flooding through her. Even this stranger could see what made her worthless. How long since the rejection? This morning. Her voice was barely audible. Something flickered across his expression. Anger, she thought, though not directed at her. And your former pack let you leave like this? Alone? Injured? The words came out rough, dangerous. They exiled me, Alara said simply. I had until sunset. The growl that rumbled from him this time was unmistakable, and despite everything, despite her pain and exhaustion and the strangeness of this entire situation, she felt a flutter of something other than fear in her stomach. Your alpha is a fool. He said it with such conviction that she almost believed it. Stay still. Before she could ask what he meant, he reached out and placed his hand over her heart. The contact sent a shock of sensation through her entire body. Heat and electricity, and something that felt almost like recognition. She gasped, her back arching away from the tree, but his other hand came up to steady her shoulder, holding her gently but firmly in place. What are you... Healing you, he said, his voice strained. Or trying to. This is going to hurt. He wasn't lying. Power flooded into her, alien and overwhelming, pouring through the places where the mate bond had torn her apart. Alara cried out, her hands flying up to grip his wrist, trying to push him away, but he was immovable as stone. The power felt like molten gold in her veins, burning away the ragged edges of her severed bond, cauterizing wounds she hadn't known she carried. It hurt worse than the rejection itself. She heard herself screaming, or maybe she was only screaming inside her own head. She couldn't tell anymore. The world had narrowed to just the burning, the tearing, the remaking. And then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Alara collapsed forward, and he caught her, pulling her against his chest as she shuddered and gasped for air. His arms came around her, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other spread across her back, and she could feel his heart beating steady and strong beneath her cheek. Breathe, he murmured against her hair. Just breathe. The worst is over. She tried. Slowly, gradually, her breathing evened out. The pain had dulled to a distant ache instead of the tearing agony that had consumed her since morning. She felt hollowed out, fragile, but also somehow more whole than she'd been in hours. Who are you? She whispered against his chest. There was a long pause, then... Chiron. Just the name, nothing more, but something about the way he said it made her think it should mean something, made her think she should recognize it. Thank you, Alara breathed, for helping me. His arms tightened around her almost imperceptibly. Don't thank me yet. Before she could ask what he meant, exhaustion crashed over her like a wave, and the darkness pulled her under. Alara woke to the smell of wood smoke and something cooking, meat, she thought, though her stomach was too knotted to care about food. She was lying on something soft, not the forest floor, not mud and roots and rain, actual softness. Her eyes flew open, and she found herself staring at a ceiling of rough-hewn beams, firelight dancing across the dark wood. Where? Memory crashed back. The rejection, the forest, the massive black wolf. Chiron. She sat up too quickly, and her head spun. The phantom pain of the severed bond was still there, but muted now, manageable. Whatever Chiron had done had worked, at least partially. She looked down and discovered she was wearing a shirt that wasn't hers, thick linen, far too large, smelling of pine and that intoxicating winter scent she was beginning to associate with him. Her own clothes were gone. Heat flooded her face as she clutched the shirt tighter around herself. It fell to mid-thigh, covering her decently enough, but the knowledge that someone, that he, had undressed her while she was unconscious made her skin prickle with mortified awareness. Your clothes were soaked through. You would have frozen. His voice came from across the room, and Alara's head snapped toward it. Chiron stood near a stone fireplace, tending something in a pot suspended over the flames. He'd dressed, thank God, dark trousers and a loose shirt that did nothing to hide the breadth of his shoulders or the lean, dangerous lines of his body. His black hair was tied back, revealing the sharp angles of his face in profile. "Where am I?" Her voice came out rougher than she intended. "My home." He didn't look at her, his attention seemingly focused on whatever he was cooking. "Deep in the Ashenfell territory. You're safe here." Ashenfell. The name triggered something in her memory, stories she'd heard, whispered warnings among her former pack. The Ashenfell territory was wild, largely unmapped, and ruled by... Oh no. "You're him," Alara breathed. "The Alpha King." Now he did look at her, those golden eyes catching the firelight and seeming to glow. "Does that frighten you?" It should. She should be terrified. The Alpha King was a legend, a figure of power and violence who'd united 7 warring packs through sheer dominance. He was dangerous, unpredictable, and she was alone with him in the middle of nowhere, wearing only his shirt. "Should it?" she asked instead. Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face, there and gone so quickly she almost missed it. Most would say yes. Most aren't wolfless and rejected, with nothing left to lose. The bitterness in her own voice surprised her. Chiron was silent for a long moment, studying her with an intensity that made her want to look away. She forced herself to hold his gaze, lifting her chin slightly despite the vulnerability of her position. "You're not nothing," he said finally, his voice low and edged with something she couldn't identify. "Don't say that again." The command in his tone should have rankled. Instead, it sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with cold. She pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them, suddenly very aware of how little she wore and how his scent surrounded her from the shirt she'd borrowed. "Why did you help me?" The question had been burning in her mind since she'd woken. "You don't know me. I'm no one." "I told you." He moved toward her, and she tracked the predatory grace of it, the way he seemed to flow rather than walk. He stopped a careful distance away, close enough to speak quietly, but far enough that she didn't feel crowded. "You're not no one." That's not an answer. His jaw tightened. No, it's not. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things. Alara could hear the fire crackling, could hear the wind outside whistling through the trees, could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. "How long was I unconscious?" she asked, changing the subject. 2 days. 2? She stared at him. 2 days? "The healing took more out of you than I anticipated. Your body needed time to recover." He paused. "You should eat something. You'll need your strength." "Strength for what?" Something dark passed over his expression. "We need to talk about why I brought you here, about what I need from you." Dread coiled in Alara's stomach. Of course, she should have known there would be a price. Nothing came free, especially not from someone like him. "What do you want?" Chiron crossed his arms over his chest, and the movement made the shirt pull tight across his shoulders in a way that was entirely distracting. When he spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. "In 3 months' time, I'm required to present my chosen mate to the Council of Alphas. If I don't, my claim to the unified territories becomes void, and we return to clan warfare." He held her gaze. "I need you to pretend to be that mate." Alara's mouth fell open. "You... what?" "I'll give you anything you want in return. Money, protection, a new pack, a new name, anything." His expression was unreadable. "All you have to do is stand beside me for 1 night and let them believe you're mine." "That's insane," she whispered. "They'll never believe it. I'm wolfless. I'm rejected. I'm..." "Perfect," Chiron interrupted, his golden eyes burning into hers. "You're perfect because you have no pack loyalty, no political connections, and nothing to lose. You're perfect because no one will see you coming." Before she could respond, before she could process any of what he'd just said, a howl split the night air. Close, too close. Chiron's entire body went rigid, his head snapping toward the door. When he looked back at her, his eyes had shifted, no longer gold but pitch black. "We have company," he said, his voice dropping into something inhuman, "and they're not friendly." "Stay inside." Chiron moved toward the door with fluid speed, his body already beginning to shift, bones cracking, muscles rippling beneath his skin. "Wait!" Alara scrambled off the bed, her legs unsteady. "What's happening?" He paused at the threshold, glancing back at her. In the firelight, with his eyes pure black and his canines elongating, he looked every inch the predator he was. "Hunters. They've been tracking me for weeks. I thought I'd lost them." "Hunters?" Fear spiked through her. She'd heard stories of the human hunters who tracked shifters, who believed all supernatural creatures were abominations to be destroyed. "Stay inside." Each word was bitten off, final. Then he was gone, the door slamming behind him. Alara stood frozen in the center of the small cabin, her heart hammering. Another howl split the night, followed by shouts, human voices, rough and commanding. Then came a sound that turned her blood to ice, the sharp crack of a crossbow firing. She couldn't just stand here, couldn't hide while Chiron fought alone, not after he'd saved her life. But what could she do? She was wolfless, powerless, no use in a fight. The thought tasted like Marcus's voice in her head, and something hot and angry flared in her chest. She'd spent 3 years believing that lie. 3 years letting her lack of a wolf define her worth. Alara grabbed the first thing she could find, a heavy iron poker from beside the fireplace, and yanked the door open. The clearing outside the cabin was chaos. 4 men in dark leather armor circled Chiron's massive wolf form, crossbows raised. Silver-tipped bolts gleamed in the moonlight. One bolt was already embedded in Chiron's shoulder, dark blood matting his midnight fur. He moved with lethal grace despite the injury, his fangs bared in a snarl that vibrated through the air. But 4 against 1, all armed with silver. The odds weren't good. One of the hunters spotted her in the doorway. "Another one! There!" A crossbow swung in her direction. "No!" Chiron's roar was more human than wolf, filled with rage and something that sounded like fear. He lunged at the hunter who'd aimed at her, his jaws closing around the man's arm before he could fire. The hunter screamed. But the distraction cost him. Another hunter fired, and the bolt caught Chiron in his hindquarters. He stumbled, his legs buckling, and Alara watched in horror as he crashed to the ground. She didn't think, didn't plan, just ran. The iron poker felt pathetically inadequate in her hands as she charged toward the nearest hunter. He turned, surprise flashing across his scarred face at the sight of a half-dressed girl attacking him with the fireplace tool. That surprise was her only advantage. Alara swung with everything she had, and the poker connected with his temple with a sickening crack. He dropped like a stone.
"You little bitch!"
Another hunter grabbed her from behind, his arm locking around her throat. She couldn't breathe, couldn't scream, black spots dancing at the edges of her vision. Then his grip vanished, and she heard his scream cut off abruptly. She spun to see Chiron, still in wolf form, bleeding from multiple wounds, standing over the hunter's body. His golden eyes found hers, and even through the animal form, she could read the fury there. 2 hunters remained. They backed away, their bravado evaporating as they faced an enraged alpha who just watched someone try to strangle his what? "Fall back!" one of them shouted, and they turned to run into the forest. Chiron started to follow, but his legs gave out again. He shifted back to human form as he fell, the transformation rough and painful to watch. By the time Alara reached him, he was on his knees in the dirt, naked and bleeding, 3 silver bolts still embedded in his flesh. "You stupid, reckless." He looked up at her, his eyes flickering between gold and black. "I told you to stay inside." "You're welcome." Alara shot back, adrenaline still singing through her veins. Despite everything, the blood, the pain, the danger, something that might have been admiration crossed his face. "Help me up. We need to get inside before they come back with reinforcements." She looped his arm over her shoulders, staggering under his weight. He was heavy, all muscle, and barely contained power, and the contact sent that now familiar shock of sensation through her everywhere they touched. His skin was fever-hot, slick with blood and sweat. They made it to the cabin more through determination than grace. Chiron collapsed on the bed, breathing hard, his body already trying to heal around the silver embedded in his flesh. The bolts, he gritted out. You have to remove them. Silver prevents healing. Ilara stared at the bolts protruding from his shoulder, his side, his thigh. I've never. Pull them out, fast. His jaw clenched. It's going to hurt like hell, but they need to come out, now. She moved to his shoulder first, her hands shaking as she gripped the bolt shaft. His blood made her fingers slip, and she had to wipe them on the oversized shirt she wore. On 3, he said. 1. She pulled. His roar shook the cabin walls. The second bolt came out easier, though Chiron's muscles locked rigid beneath her hands, every line of his body taut with agony. Ilara tried not to think about how intimately she was touching him, her fingers slick with his blood as she worked. Last one, she whispered, moving to his thigh. This bolt had gone deep, the silver buried almost to the fletching. She would have to grip close to where it entered his flesh, her hands on his bare skin, on the hard muscle of his upper thigh. Heat flooded her face, but there was no time for embarrassment. She wrapped her fingers around the bolt's shaft.
Do it,
Chiron growled through clenched teeth. She pulled, and this time the bolt resisted, caught on something inside. His hand shot out and gripped her wrist, not roughly but with desperate strength, as a sound tore from his throat that was more animal than human. I'm sorry. Ilara pulled harder, and finally the bolt came free in a rush of dark blood. Chiron's grip on her wrist loosened, and he collapsed back against the pillows, his chest heaving. Already, the wounds were beginning to close, his supernatural healing kicking in now that the silver was removed. But the process was slow, painful, his body fighting the poison left behind. Water, he managed. There's a pitcher. Ilara found it on a rough wooden table and brought it to him. She helped him sit up enough to drink, very aware of his naked body, of how close they were, of the way his eyes tracked her movements even through his pain. When he drunk his fill, she set the pitcher aside and reached for a cloth, dampening it. Let me clean the wounds.
You don't have to.
You saved my life twice now, she interrupted. Let me help. Something passed between them in the silence that followed, some unspoken agreement. He nodded once and lay back, surrendering to her ministrations. Ilara started with the wound on his shoulder, gently washing away the blood. His skin was impossibly hot beneath her fingers, and she could feel the tension in him, could see the way his jaw remained clenched as she worked. But he didn't flinch away from her touch. Why did you really bring me here? The question slipped out as she moved to clean the wound on his side. The truth this time. Chiron was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, because when I found you in those woods, dying from a severed bond, I felt something I haven't felt in a decade. What? The mate pull. His golden eyes opened, fixing on her with an intensity that stole her breath. You're my fated mate, Ilara. The cloth fell from her nerveless fingers. It's not possible. I was already mated. To Marcus, the bond was a mistake, Chiron said, his voice rough. Sometimes the bond manifests early with the wrong person, especially in young wolves. It happens, rare, but it happens. He reached up, his hand cupping her jaw with surprising gentleness. But this, what's between us? This is real. Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs. She could feel the truth of his words in the way her body responded to him, in the electric sensation that raced through her at every touch, in the way his scent made her dizzy with confused longing. But I'm wolfless, she whispered. I can't be anyone's mate. I'm broken. You're not broken. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, and the tenderness of the gesture made her throat tight. You're perfect. You're mine. The possessiveness in those last 2 words should have frightened her. Instead, they sent heat pooling low in her belly. The council will never accept me, she said, trying desperately to find solid ground in this conversation. You said it yourself. You need a mate they'll believe. They'll accept you because I'll make them accept you. His hand slid from her jaw to the back of her neck, pulling her closer. In 3 months, I'll present you as my chosen Luna, and they will bow. Chiron. The door exploded inward. Alara screamed as figures poured into the cabin, not human hunters this time, but wolves. Shifters. A half-dozen of them, all in fighting form, their eyes glowing in the darkness. And at their center stood a man she recognized, even though she'd only seen him once before. Marcus. Her former mate's eyes found her, kneeling beside Chiron's naked, wounded body, wearing only an oversized shirt, her hands still bloody from tending his injuries. His expression twisted with rage and something darker. "So it's true," Marcus snarled. The little wolfless whore found herself a new alpha. Chiron moved faster than should have been possible in his injured state. One moment he was lying down, the next he was on his feet between her and Marcus, his body radiating lethal intent despite his nakedness and wounds.
You have 5 seconds to leave my territory,
Chiron said, his voice dropping into something inhuman.
Before I tear your throat out with my bare hands.
Marcus smiled, cold and cruel.
I'm not here for you, King. I'm here for what's mine.
His eyes slid past Chiron to Alara.
She's still bonded to the Thornwood Pack by blood oath, and according to Pack law, I can reclaim her any time within a year of rejection.
Alara's blood turned to ice.
What? Did you really think, Marcus continued, his smile widening, that I'd just let you go?
You're coming back with me, Alara, and this time you won't be leaving. Blood oath? Alara's voice came out strangled. I never swore a blood oath. Your mother did, Marcus said, his tone smug. When she joined the Thornwood Pack pregnant with you, all offspring born under pack protection are bound by blood until formally released. And since I rejected you rather than releasing you, he shrugged. You're still mine to reclaim. The words hit Alara like a physical blow. All this time, she'd thought she was free, thought the rejection had severed everything. But she'd merely traded one prison for another. That law is archaic, Chiron growled. No one's enforced it in decades. But it still stands. Marcus's eyes gleamed with malicious satisfaction. And I'm enforcing it now. So unless you want to start a war over a wolfless reject, King, I suggest you hand her over. Alara felt Chiron's body vibrate with barely contained rage, could see his muscles bunching as if preparing to attack despite his injuries. He would fight, would die fighting, probably, against 6 wolves when he could barely stand, because of her.
No.
The word came out stronger than she felt. She stepped around Chiron, ignoring his snarl of protest. I'll go.
Alara.
Chiron's hand shot out to grab her arm, but she pulled away. I won't let you die from me, she said quietly, meeting his golden eyes. Not when we both know I'm not worth it. The pain that flashed across his face was worse than any wound.
You don't understand what you're...
I understand perfectly. She turned back to Marcus, lifting her chin even as terror clawed at her insides. Let's go. Marcus's smile was victorious and cruel. Good girl. Always knew you'd learn to obey eventually. He gestured to his wolves. Bind her. I'm not taking chances this time. One of the wolves shifted to human form and approached with silver-laced rope. The sight of it made Alara's stomach turn. Silver might not burn her like it would a shifter, but the message was clear. She was a prisoner. As the wolf reached for her wrists, something strange happened. The air around her began to shimmer. At first, Alara thought it was fear making her vision blur. But then she felt it, a surge of something building inside her chest, pressing outward, demanding release. It felt like power, but also like rage, like every moment of humiliation and pain and worthlessness she'd ever endured had suddenly crystallized into something tangible. What? The wolf with the rope stumbled backward, his eyes wide. What is she? The shimmer intensified, and Alara felt heat racing through her veins like liquid fire. Not painful, exactly, but overwhelming. Too much, too big for her body to contain. Impossible. Marcus breathed, and for the first time since he'd entered, he looked uncertain. Alara. Kieran's voice cut through the chaos, steady and sure. Listen to me, don't fight it, let it come. Let what come? Her own voice sounded distant, strange. I can't. You have a wolf, Kieran said, and the certainty in his words made her eyes snap to his. You've always had one, she was just dormant, waiting. That's not possible, Alara whispered, even as the power inside her surged higher, stronger. I was tested, multiple times. There was nothing. There was everything, Kieran interrupted. I could smell it the moment I found you in those woods. Your wolf was buried deep, suppressed by trauma or genetics, or both. But she's there, and she's waking up. The shimmer around Alara exploded outward in a wave of pure energy that sent Marcus's wolves stumbling backward. She felt something inside her shift, unfold, stretch toward consciousness after years of silence. And then she heard it. A voice in her mind that wasn't her own. Strong, ancient, furious. Mine, the voice growled. He is mine. They will not take us from him. Oh gods, Alara gasped as the full weight of the awakening crashed over her. Her wolf. She had a wolf. After 20 years of nothing, of emptiness, of being called broken and worthless and wrong, she had a wolf. And her wolf knew, with absolute certainty, that Kieran was their mate. The bond snapped into place like a rubber band pulled too tight and finally released. Alara cried out as it hit her. The mate pull, real and undeniable, a golden thread connecting her to Kieran so strongly she could feel his heartbeat as if it were her own. His pain, his rage, his absolute refusal to let her go. She's mine, Kieran said, and his voice carried the weight of an alpha's command. She bears my mark now. The bond is complete. Marcus snarled. You can't have bonded her that quickly. That's... Fated mates bond instantly when both acknowledge the pull, Kieran interrupted. His eyes never left Alara's. And we both feel it, don't we, Alara? She did. God help her, she felt it like a living thing wrapped around her heart. The blood oath is void, Kieran continued, his voice dropping into something dangerous. She's mine by bond right, which supersedes pack oath, and if you try to take her, you'll have to go through me. And trust me, Marcus, even injured, even outnumbered, I will tear through every single one of you before I let you touch her again. The temperature in the room plummeted. Marcus's wolves shifted uneasily, suddenly aware they were facing not just an alpha king, but a fated mate protecting his chosen. There was nothing more dangerous in their world. Marcus stared at Alara, then at Kieran, calculation flickering behind his eyes. She could see him weighing his options. Fight an alpha king over a girl he'd rejected, or retreat and save face. You expect me to believe this? Marcus gestured at Alara dismissively. 2 days ago she was wolfless. Now suddenly she's your fated mate? Convenient. Believe what you want. Kieran's voice was glacial. But if you don't leave my territory in the next 30 seconds, you won't live long enough to doubt anything ever again. The threat hung in the air like drawn steel. Marcus's wolves shuffled backward, their survival instincts clearly screaming at them to run. Only Marcus remained rooted in place, his pride warring with his fear. This isn't over, Marcus finally said, but Alara could hear the hollow ring of defeat in his voice. The council will hear about this. An alpha king claiming a wolfless reject as his mate, they'll never accept it. Then they can challenge me at the unveiling. Kieran took a single step forward, and even injured and naked, he radiated such raw dominance that Marcus flinched. 3 months from now, I'll present Alara as my Luna, and anyone who objects can face me in the circle. The circle. The ancient rite of combat where challenges were settled through blood. No alpha in their right mind would challenge Kieran Ashenfell in single combat. Marcus knew it too. His jaw clenched, fury and humiliation warring across his face. You'll regret this. The only regret I have, Kieran said softly,
dangerously, is that I didn't find her sooner, before you had the chance to damage her. His eyes flashed pure black. Now get out, before I forget I'm trying to be civilized. Marcus turned on his heel and stalked out, his wolves scrambling to follow. The last one paused at the door, glancing back at Alara with something that might have been pity, before disappearing into the night. The moment they were gone, Chiron's knees buckled. Chiron! Alara caught him before he hit the floor, staggering under his weight. The confrontation had cost him everything he had left. His wounds had reopened, fresh blood seeping through partially healed flesh. She half carried, half dragged him back to the bed. He collapsed onto it with a groan, his breathing labored. You shouldn't have. Alara's voice broke. You could have died. Over me. Over nothing. You're not nothing, he growled, even now. Stop saying that. But I am! The words exploded out of her, 3 years of internalized worthlessness finally finding voice. I'm broken, Chiron. Maybe I have a wolf now, but she's damaged too. Dormant for 20 years. What kind of Luna would that make me? What kind of mate? Mine. He reached up despite his pain, his hand finding her face. You're mine. That's all that matters. Alara felt tears burning hot trails down her cheeks. Why? Why do you want me? You could have anyone. Someone strong, someone... Because when I found you dying in those woods... Chiron interrupted, his thumb wiping away her tears. I felt the mate pull for the first time in my life. Because your scent drives me insane. Because watching you charge at armed hunters to save me was the bravest and most foolish thing I've ever witnessed. His eyes softened. Because you're perfect, exactly as you are. The sincerity in his voice broke something inside her. The walls she'd built to survive rejection, to survive being called worthless, crumbled. I'm scared, she whispered. I don't know how to be what you need. Then we'll figure it out together. He pulled her down until she was lying beside him, tucking her against his chest despite his wounds. You don't have to be perfect, Alara. You just have to be mine. She could feel his heartbeat beneath her cheek, strong and steady, could feel the mate bond humming between them, golden and unbreakable. Could feel, for the first time in her life, like she belonged somewhere, like she belonged to someone who wouldn't throw her away. The council, she said quietly. Marcus was right. They won't accept me. Let me worry about the council. Chiron's hand stroked through her hair, the gesture soothing. Right now, I need you to do something for me. What? I need you to accept the bond. Fully. His voice was serious now. What happened tonight, your wolf waking, that was just the beginning. But for the bond to complete, for you to truly be mine and me to be yours, you have to choose it. Choose me. Alara lifted her head to look at him. I thought it already snapped into place. The recognition did, he said. But the claiming, that's different. That requires consent. Choice. I need you to accept my mark, Alara. I need you to let me complete the bond. Her breath caught. The mark. The permanent claiming bite that would tie them together for life. She'd worn Marcus's mark once, before he'd rejected her and it had faded. The thought of bearing another's mark, of risking that kind of pain again. But this was different. Chiron was different. And the wolf inside her was howling with desperate need, demanding she say yes. When? The word came out barely audible. Chiron's eyes blazed gold. Now. Now? Alara's heart hammered so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Chiron sat up despite his injuries, moving with predatory intent. His golden eyes were molten, fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel stripped bare. Unless you're not ready, I won't force this, Alara. It has to be your choice. It was her choice. That was the difference. Marcus had marked her without asking, had claimed her like property. But Chiron, dangerous, powerful Chiron, was waiting for her permission. Where? Her voice trembled. Here. His fingers traced the curve where her neck met her shoulder, and the simple touch sent electricity racing through her entire body. It will hurt, but only for a moment. Then, his eyes darkened. Then you'll feel everything, the full bond, no barriers between us. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. No barriers, he would feel everything she felt. Know everything she thought. There would be nowhere to hide her inadequacies, her fears, her brokenness. As if reading her mind, Chiron cupped her face between his hands. I want all of it, Alara. The broken parts, the scared parts, all of it. Give it to me. Her wolf surged inside her, demanding, desperate. Yes, yes, mine. Okay, Alara whispered. I choose you, I choose this. The words had barely left her lips before Chiron moved. He pulled her onto his lap, positioning her so she straddled him, her thighs on either side of his hips. The intimacy of the position made her gasp, made heat flood through her body. Hold on to me, he commanded, his voice rough with barely contained need. She obeyed, her hands gripping his shoulders. She could feel the tension in his muscles, could feel how hard he was fighting for control. His hand slid up her back, one tangling in her hair, the other splaying possessively across her spine. Chiron. Trust me. He tilted her head to the side, exposing the vulnerable curve of her throat. His breath was hot against her skin, and she felt his lips brush the spot where he would mark her. Trust me, mate. The word, mate, sent a shiver through her entire body. Then he bit down. The pain was sharp, immediate, a burning that radiated from the point of contact through her entire nervous system. Alara cried out, her nails digging into his shoulders, her back arching. But even as the pain peaked, something else began to build. Power. It flooded into her through the bite. Golden and ancient and overwhelming. Not just his power, but something else. The bond itself, snapping into place with such force that reality seemed to tilt sideways. She could feel him inside her mind, his presence vast and warm and absolutely certain. And he could feel her. Every fear, every hope, every secret she'd ever kept. She was laid bare before him, defenseless, vulnerable in a way she'd never been with anyone. But instead of rejection, she felt only his absolute acceptance, his fierce possessiveness, his unshakable certainty that she was his and he was hers. Mine. His wolf's voice echoed in her mind, mixing with her own wolf's triumphant cry. Mine. The pain transformed into something else entirely, pleasure so intense it bordered on unbearable. Every nerve ending in her body seemed to light up at once, sensation crashing over her in waves that made her shake and gasp and cling to him like he was the only solid thing in a spinning world. When he finally released the bite, she felt his tongue sweep across the wound, sealing it, marking it permanently. She knew without looking that there would be a scar there now, his claim, visible for all to see. Look at me. His command was gentle but absolute. Alara forced her eyes open, meeting his gaze. His eyes were pure gold now, glowing with otherworldly light. She wondered if hers looked the same. How do you feel? He asked, his hand steadying her as she trembled against him. I feel... She didn't have words for it. She felt complete in a way she'd never imagined possible. Felt powerful. Felt chosen. I feel like I'm home. Something fierce and tender crossed his face. You are home. You're with me, and I'm never letting you go. He kissed her then, deep and claiming, and she could taste her own blood on his lips, mixed with something wild and intoxicating that was purely him. The kiss sent another surge of sensation through the newly formed bond, and she felt his desire mixing with hers until she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Alara felt her wolf settle contentedly inside her, sated, claimed, complete. 3 months, Chiron said, his forehead resting against hers. 3 months until I present you to the council. Can you be ready? She thought about the Alara who'd melt in the mud accepting rejection, the wolfless girl everyone had called worthless. That girl was gone now, burned away in the golden fire of this bond. I'll be ready, she promised.
The knock at the door made them both freeze. My king, urgent news from the capital. The council has moved up the unveiling. You have 1 week to present your mate, not 3 months. Chiron's arms tightened around her protectively as the implications sank in. 1 week. They had 1 week to convince the most powerful alphas in 7 territories that a formerly wolfless reject was worthy to be their Luna. 1 week to prepare for the fight of their lives. The laughter died the moment Chiron unveiled his bride. Elara stood at the top of the marble stairs, her hand clasped firmly in Chiron's, and watched the sea of faces below transform from mockery to shock to something that looked like awe. The dress Chiron had commissioned for her was a masterpiece. Deep crimson silk that fell to the floor in elegant waves, embroidered with silver thread that caught the light like moonbeams. But it wasn't the dress that silenced them, it was her eyes. They glowed pure gold, visible even from a distance, marking her unmistakably as a wolf. As an alpha's mate, as Luna. The week leading up to this moment had been brutal. Chiron had trained her relentlessly, teaching her to control her newly awakened wolf, to project dominance, to stand as an equal beside a king. She'd failed more times than she could count, had broken down crying from frustration and fear. But she'd also learned she was stronger than she'd ever imagined. Members of the council, Chiron's voice rang out across the throne room. I present to you Elara Ashenfell, my fated mate, your Luna Queen. The formal words echoed in the sudden silence. Then slowly, the alphas began to kneel. Not all of them, some remained standing, defiant, unwilling to accept. But enough knelt that the message was clear. She had their tentative acceptance. For now. Marcus stood among those still standing, his face twisted with impotent rage. But he didn't challenge. Couldn't challenge. Because everyone in this room could now see what he'd been too blind to recognize. Elara was powerful in her own right. The ceremony proceeded according to ancient tradition. Elara spoke the vows that bound her to Chiron's pack, to his people, to his crown. With each word, she felt the bond between them strengthen, deepening into something unbreakable. When Chiron placed the Luna's crown on her head, a delicate circlet of silver and moonstones, she didn't flinch under its weight. She lifted her chin and met the eyes of every alpha who doubted her. Let them doubt, she knew her worth, now. The feast that followed lasted hours. Elara smiled until her face hurt, accepted congratulations from wolves who'd sneered at her a week ago, and played her role perfectly. But beneath the polished surface, she counted the minutes until she and Chiron could escape. Finally, as the moon rose high over the palace, Chiron leaned close and whispered, "Come, I want to show you something." He led her through hidden corridors to a tower room she'd never seen before. When he opened the door, her breath caught. The room was circular, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the forest stretching endlessly in all directions. But it was the interior that made her eyes burn with tears. Books lined the walls, hundreds of them. A massive fireplace dominated one side, already lit and crackling. Plush chairs and blankets created cozy nooks for reading, and in the center stood a desk with fresh parchment and ink. You said you loved to read, Chiron said quietly. That it was the one escape you had in the Thornwood pack, I thought. He hesitated, uncertain in a way she rarely saw. I thought you might like a place that's just yours. Elara turned to him, this fierce alpha king who'd claimed her, protected her, believed in her when no one else had. I love it. I love. The words caught in her throat. Say it. His hands framed her face, his golden eyes searching hers. Please. I love you, she whispered. I love you, Chiron. The smile that broke across his face was radiant, transforming his usually stern features into something beautiful and young and full of joy. I love you too, my mate, my Luna, my Elara. He kissed her then, deep and slow and claiming, and she felt the bond between them sing with happiness. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. We did it, he murmured. You did it. We're not done yet, Elara reminded him. Some of the alphas still. Let them doubt. Chiron's arms tightened around her. They'll learn, and if they don't. His eyes glinted with dangerous promise. I'll teach them. Alara laughed, the sound free and genuine. A year ago, she'd been kneeling in mud, accepting rejection, believing she was worthless. Now she stood in a tower room as Luna Queen, wrapped in the arms of her fated mate, powerful in her own right. What are you thinking? Chiron asked. She looked up at him, at his beautiful fierce face, and smiled. I'm thinking about the future, about what comes next. And what comes next? Alara placed her hand over her stomach, where she'd been feeling strange flutters for the past few days. Too soon to be certain, but her wolf knew. Her wolf was absolutely certain. Everything, she said softly, everything comes next. Understanding dawned in Chiron's eyes, followed by fierce joy and protective possessiveness. He swept her into his arms, spinning her around as she laughed. Outside the windows, the moon shone bright over their kingdom, their home, their future, and for the first time in her life, Alara wasn't afraid of what tomorrow might bring. She was ready for it.